data analytics using Excel, and for this video we'll be discussing about working with range names. Introduction. While doing data analysis, referring to various data will be more meaningful and easy if the reference is by names rather than cell reference, either a single cell or a range of cells. For example, if you're calculating the net present value based on a discount rate and series of cash flows, the formula net present value equals NPV discount rate cash flows is more meaningful than we use C10 is equal to NPV C2 C6 to C6 to C8. So of course that is obvious, while the previous one, this formula is more meaningful. With Excel, you can create and use meaningful names to various parts of your data. The advantages of using range names include a meaningful range name such as cash flows is much easier to remember than a range address such as C6 to C8. Entering a name is less error prone than entering a cell or range address. If you type a name incorrectly in a formula, Excel will display a name error. You can quickly move to areas of your worksheet by using the defined names. With names, your formulas will be more understandable and easier to use. For example, a formula net income equals gross income minus deduction is more intuitive than C40 is equal to C20 minus B18. Creating formulas with range names is easier than with cell or range address. You can copy a cell or range name into a formula by using formula autocomplete. Copying names using formula autocomplete. So what we do here is you type the first letter of the name in the formula, and a drop-down box appears with function names and range names. Select the required name and it is copied into your formula. So for example, in this case, so if you type letter C, a drop-down box appears and you can select the name or you can continue typing. So that's what we call the formula autocomplete. Range name syntax rules. Excel has the following syntax rules for names. You can use any combination of letters, numbers, and the symbols. Underscores. So the symbols are underscores, backslashes, and periods. Other symbols are not allowed. A name can begin with a character, underscore, or backslash. But of course, it would be better to start with a character. A name cannot begin with a number. Example is first quarter, wherein we started with 1, or resemble a cell address like QTR1 because this can be interpreted as a cell address. If you refer to use such names, precede the name with an underscore. So just like in this case. Or a backslash. So just like in this case, we started with the backslash or we started with an underscore, but it will make the formula rather confusing. So if you can avoid these variables or some variable similar to this, then do so. Names cannot contain spaces. If you want to distinguish two words in a name, you can use underscore, just like cash flow. So we have underscore instead of cash, space, and then flow. So spaces are not should not be contained in variables. Your defined names should not clash with Excel's internally defined names, such as print area, print titles, consolidate area, and sheet title. If you define the same names, they will override the Excel's internal names and you will not get any error message. However, it is advised not to do so. Keep the name short but understandable. Though you can use up to 255 characters. creating range names. So you can create range names in three ways: using the name box, using the new name dialog box, and using the selection dialog box. So we will be discussing these three methods or three ways in our next slide. So creating range name using the name box. So to create a range name using the name box, that is to the left of the formula bar, is the fastest way. Follow the steps given below. So the first step is to select the range for which you want to define a name. So you have to select the range. Then number 2, click on the name box, then type the name and press enter to create the name. So again, the steps: select the range, click on the name box, and then type the name and press enter. So here, that's what we did here. We selected the range. This is the range. Then type the name. So you type array 1. Then you press enter key. Then that's it. You now have this range name. So the name of the range is called array 1. So here's another method. Create a range name using the new name dialog box. So you can also create range names using the new dialog box from Formulas tab. So the first step is select the range for which you want to define a name. Then step 2, click the Formulas tab. Then 3, click Define Name in the Define Names group. The new name dialog box appears. Then step number 4, type the name in the box next to the name. Then step 5, check that the range that is selected and displayed in the first box is correct, and then you just click OK. So let's go about this step again. Click the range, click Formula tab, then click Define Name. Then the new name dialog box appears. Type the name, and then check the range that it is referring to. So this is the step. Select the range, click on Formulas, then Define Names, then type the name and check if this is correct. Then just click OK. So that is how we create also a range name. Then next is create a range name using the Create Names for Selection dialog box. You can also create range names using the Create Names from the Selection dialog box from the Formulas tab when you have text values that are adjacent to your range. So step 1 is select the range for which you want to define a name along with the row or column that contains the name. Then, so again, the row or the column that contains the name should be included in the range. Click the Formulas tab, then create from selection in the Define Names group. So click that one, and then Create Names from Selection dialog box appears. Then select top row for this example as a text appears in the top row of the selection, because in the example in the next video, the name that we'll be using is actually at the top row. So check the range that got selected and displayed in the box next to refers to be correct. And then click OK. So this is the step. So select this one, click Formulas. So instead of defining, we use Create from Selection. Then from Create Selection, we have these options. Now we choose top row because we want the top row, this one, to be the name that will be used. That's why we created this from the selection. So we use top row because the top row here will be the name that will be used or that will be created. So to check, here we can have your largest value large array 1. And that is now to check if we really have the correct name, or we were successful in creating the name. You can create names with multiple selections also. In the example given below, you can name the row of marks of each student with the student's name. So this will create names. So here, what we did is first select this range, okay, and then click formula, then create from selection, and then here we choose left column. So that means this column will be used for the name, and that means that each row will have a name based on the value of the left column. So with that, now we can find the total marks for each student with sum and then followed by the student name. So instead of typing the range, we just use a student name. Like for example here, you have sum and then Krieger Doris. So the name was created in the procedure on the previous slide, and here now we can use that name to get the sum. So we have sum Krieger Doris, sum Oliveira, Manuel, etc. Okay, so these are the range names in the formulas. Creating names for constants. Suppose you have a constant that will be used throughout your workbook. You can assign a name to it directly without placing it in a cell. In the example below, savings bank interest rate is set to 5%. So how do we do that? We click define name. In the new name dialog box, type savings bank interest rate in the name box. In the scope, select workbook. In the refers to, clear the contents and type 5%. And then we just click OK. So what is new here is that instead of the refers to box, instead of a range, we type the value. So here, this is now the new name dialog box. So that is after we click define name. So we type the name of the variable or the name, the range name or the name of the constant rather. The scope is workbook, and then we type here the value. By the way, 5% is 0.05. Then we just click OK. So the name savings bank interest rate is set now to a constant 5%. You can verify this in the name manager. So you can see that the value is set to 0.05, and in the refers to equals 0.05 is placed. So in the name manager, you can view here the name of the range name or the name. Then we have here the value, and then refers to is also the value. Then the scope is workbook. Managing names. An Excel workbook can have any number of name cells and ranges. You can manage these names with the name manager. So the name manager, so how do we open the name manager? We just click on the formulas tab, then click name manager in the define names group. Then the name manager dialog box appears, and all the names defined in the current workbook are displayed. So this is how we do it. We click on formulas. We click on name manager. So after clicking this dialog box appears, and you notice that all of the names are here, and we have additional information like values, refers to, and scope, and comments if we place some comments. The list of names are displayed with the defined values cell reference, including sheet name, scope, and comment. The name manager has the options too, so we can define a new name with a new button. So we can define a name, we can edit a defined name, we can delete a defined name, we can filter the defined names by category, and modify the range of a defined name that it refers to. So we have here to add new, to edit an existing one, to delete. And these are the defined names and the first two. So these are the first two. And we can also have filter, especially if we have plenty of names in our worksheet. Scope of a name. The scope of a name by default is the workbook. You can find the scope of a defined names from the list of names under the scope column in the name manager. You can define the scope of a new name when you define the name using new name dialog box. For example, you're defining the name interest rate, then you can see that the scope of the new name interest rate is the workbook. So that's the default. So let's say, for example, interest rate here, formula, define name. So we have here interest rate. So we can type interest rate. The scope is workbook. You can place comment. The first two, list address. So it is C2. So that is C2. And of course, again, this is the scope. Suppose you want the scope of the interest rate restricted to this worksheet only. So step 1, click the down arrow in the scope box. So this one. So click on the down arrow in the scope box. Then the available scope options appears in the drop down list. So this is a drop down list. And currently we are on the NPV worksheet. So these are the names of the worksheets in the workbook. So the scope option includes workbook and the sheet names in the workbook. So these are the sheet names and the workbook. So step 2, click the current worksheet name. In this case, it's the NPV. That's the name of the worksheet, and click OK. You can define or find the sheet name in the worksheet tab. Step 3, to verify the scope is the worksheet, click name manager. In the scope columns, you will find NPV for interest rate. This means you can use the name interest rate only in the worksheet NPV, but not in the other worksheets. So this is the name dialog box, and you notice that for interest rate, so the interest rate are here. The interest rate, the scope is the name of the worksheet NPV. So again, we can only use this name in this particular worksheet. So the NPV worksheet. Deleting names with error values. Sometimes it may so happen that name definition may have errors for various reasons. You can delete such names as follows. So step 1 is click filter in the name manager dialog box. Then the following filtering options appear: clear filter, names scope to worksheet, name scope to workbook, names with errors, names without errors, define names, table names. So you can apply filter to the defined names by selecting one or more of these options. So step 2, select names with errors. So again, in the name manager, we click on filter and then we select names with errors. So names that contains errors will be displayed. So these are those with errors. So step 3, from the obtained list of names, select the ones you want to delete and click delete. So select the one you want to delete and then you can click on the delete button. Then you will get a message to confirm delete and then we just click OK. Now how do we edit names? Editing names. So to change the name, so step 1, click the cell containing the function large, for example. Then you can see 2 or more values are added in the array but are not including are not included in the function as they are not part of array 1. So you notice this is only the range of the array. So here we'll be editing the name. So this one is not included. So step 2, click the name you want to edit in the name manager. So array 1, then we click edit. So we select and then click edit. Then click edit. So we have done that. And then the dialog box appears. And then, so what we're going to do is change the name by typing the new name that you want in the name box. If you want to change the name, click the range button to the right of refers to box and include the new cell reference. So this one is the new range. Or you can click on this and then select the new range. So that's step 5. And step 6, add a comment, optional. Notice that its scope is deactive and hence cannot be changed. So you cannot change the scope if we edit. So here we now have changed the range and we have included a comment. Then we just click OK and you observe the changes made. So here the largest value now will include the newest value. So in the previous one, it only reported 400 to be the largest value, but of course it is no more. It's not anymore the correct value. Then click OK. So you will observe the changes are made. So the new array here now refers to the whole range, and new array here also includes another value. And we have the comment here. Applying names. Now consider the following example. So we have amount borrowed, number of months, 180, annual interest rate, monthly payment. So as you observe, names are not defined and used in the PMT function. So this is the name of the formula. If you place this function somewhere else in the worksheet, you also need to remember where exactly the parameter values are. You know that using names is a better option. In this case, the function is already defined with the cell references that do not have names. So again, these are referring to cells that do not have names. You can still define names and apply them. So the first step is using the create from selection, define the names. So we can formula, define names, and create from selection. So step 2, select the cell containing the formula. So this is a cell. So first, using create from selection, define the names. So click on define names. Click on this. That's step 2. Group on the formulas tab. From the drop down list, click apply name. So this one. Click on apply names. So the apply names dialog box appears. So this one, select the names that you want to apply. So select and then click OK. So again here, let's repeat. I think there's some sort of confusion. So you using the create from selection, define the names. So select the cell containing the formula, click next to define name. Define names the groups on the formula, and then from the drop down list, click apply name. So this is drop down list, click apply name. So define name and then click apply name. So once we click apply names, this one will appear. Then click on the names and then just click on OK. So select the names rather and then click on OK. So these names are based from the names here. So the selected names will be applied to the selected cell. So this will be now the appearance of our formula. So names apply to the selection. So you can also apply names to an entire worksheet by selecting the worksheet and repeating the above steps. So the same step, but we select the whole worksheet. Using names in a formula. You can use a name in the formula in the following ways. So first is typing the name if you remember it, or typing first one or two letters and using the Excel formula autocomplete feature, or clicking use in formula in the define names group on the formulas tab. Select the required name from the drop down list of define names and then double click on that name. So that's step number 3, or the method number 3. Now, using names in the formula. So this is I think this is the third one. So define names. So we have formulas, use in formula. So these are the define names, and then we just select and then paste names. So that's one way. Using the paste name dialog box. So select the paste names option from the drop down list of define names, and then the paste name dialog box appears. Select the name in the paste names dialog box and double click it. So this is the paste name dialog box. Select, then double click. So to use that name in a formula. Viewing names in the workbook. You can get all the names in your workbook along with the references and save them or print them. So click an empty cell where you want to copy the names in your workbook. Then click use in formula in the define names group. Then click paste names from the drop down list. Then click paste list in the paste name dialog box. So click on an empty cell. Then as a second step, click use in formula. So formulas, use in formula. And then the next step is the define names group. So use in formula. So we have here the define names group. Then we click on paste names. So paste names, then click the paste list. So this is the paste list. Paste list. The dialog box appears. And then after that, since we selected B2, so in cell B2, the names will be placed in this particular worksheet. And we have here the references. So the list of names and their corresponding references are copied at the specified locations on your worksheet as shown in the screenshot given below. So this is screenshot. Using names for range intersections. Range intersections are those individual cells that have two ranges in common. For example, in the data given below, the range B6 to F6 and the range C3 to C8 have cell C6 in common, which actually represents the marks scored by the student Kudeda Adam in exam 1. So we're referring to this cell. So for this row and this column, this is the intersection. So you can make this more meaningful with the range names. Create names with the create from selection for both student and exams. Your names will look as follows. We have exam 1, so we have name for exam 1 up to exam 4. And we have names for each row. So we have Kudeda, Adam, Krieger, Doris, Lange, Michael, etc. Then using names for a range intersection. So type Kudeda 1, exam 1 in B11. So Kudeda Adam, that's the name of this range, and then exam 1. So space in between. So here you are using the range intersection operation, space between the two ranges. So we have space between the two ranges. And this will give us the value 88. So that's actually the intersection of those names that you specified. How do we copy formulas with names? You can copy a formula with names by copy and paste within the same worksheet. You can also copy a formula with the names to a different worksheet by copy and paste, provided that all the names in the formula have Workbook as scope. Otherwise, you will get a value error. So that's it for working with ranges. So thank you very much for viewing this video.